morning and welcome to the Point. It is Tuesday, June 16th, 2020. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Television Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network YouTube channel, those of you on the website, www.gbn.gd, those of you watching on GBN channel 7, 11 or 20, and the folks listening on Classic 105 and Hot 98. This morning we are diversifying our Tuesday programs here on To The Point. Usually we facilitate Leader of the Opposition, Tobias Clement, and we are expanding the platform this morning, not just this morning, but we're expanding the platform to also include members of or stakeholders, as well as civil society, political parties, to ensure that we have a wide cross-section represented here on To The Point. And to start with, a new dispensation is former deputy political leader of the National Democratic Congress, former interim leader as well, and the current St. Patrick West caretaker for the constituency, Joseph Andall. Good morning, Mr. Andall.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. And I see that you're looking. So?
Yeah, okay. Our audio seemed to be dropping off. Just let me make sure we are right, because I want to make sure everybody can hear. Right, that should be. All right, let's hope for the best right now. Say something, let me hear you.
Yes, it's good to be back.
There we go. Right, we good to go now. All right, Mr. Andall, let's start with from the get-go. Welcome back to The Point. It's been a while since we facilitated the National Democratic Congress on the platform. How happy are you that you're once again being able to talk to the listeners and supporters of the party and members of the public?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. And there's a saying that one should not look a gift horse in the mouth. Notwithstanding that, I was happy to hear you talk about diversification in terms of the guests on the Tuesday program. And while I have no control over the programming and the managerial decisions of GBN or any other media entity for that matter, I would respectfully suggest that not only the Tuesday program, but the Wednesday and other programs also be open to facilitate a wide cross-section of views. My reason for saying this is not because of any desire for partisan advantage, but in recognition of the anomalous political situation we have in our country, where for the better part of 8 years, we had a one-party parliament. We now have a 14-1 parliament, still extremely lopsided. We all know that government has several means of getting its views out. We know that many people in different media houses and so on have their political sympathies, preferences, biases, and so on. And without pointing finger at any individual or any entity, I think we know that there is a preponderance of viewpoints favoring the current administration. Therefore, given the situation, the unbalanced situation in our parliament, I think it is extremely important that not only the National Democratic Congress, but also the leader of the official opposition and other opposition voices, other diverse viewpoints be given the opportunity to be disseminated so that the Grenadian people are faced with alternatives, with choices that would enable them to make better decisions.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure management is tuned in and will take all suggestions into consideration. The past few weeks, Tuesday has been occupied by Leader of the Opposition, Tobias Clement. Just recently, he had 2 of the 3 senators that he would name given their instruments or letters of appointment. What are your thoughts on the way that he has been filling the position of official opposition of Grenada?
Well, that is something that is entirely within his hands and his discretion, and I would not want to question his motives or his choice or anything like that. What I would like to say, though, is that I'm a bit disappointed in the administration in terms of the way that the new leader of the opposition is being treated. I noticed a note that he sent out regarding the poor facilities and in some cases, a lack of facilities afforded him to execute his official functions as leader of the opposition. And I think it is in place for us to ask the relevant authorities, the parliamentary office, the Prime Minister as leader of government, to ensure that all courtesies are afforded the leader of the opposition so that his functions can be effectively fulfilled. I also wish to take issue with what I consider to be an attack on the democratic process, an attack on our constitution by our Prime Minister in the Parliament, in which he intimated that having a leader of the opposition now will result in increasing costs to the taxpayers. Leader of the opposition is a constitutional position. It is not an imposition on the people of our country. If we want to talk about incurring additional costs to the taxpayers, Dr. Mitchell should look at the appointment of his son to a position specifically created for him. He should look also at getting into the bottom of the cell phone scandal, which, to my understanding, could have cost anywhere in the region of $1 million extended over a 5-year period. These are the kinds of things that he needs to look at, and not to try to divert attention from his poor governance record and trying to make it look as if the new leader of the opposition is an imposition on the country. We see, for example, that MPs who have no ministerial portfolio are afforded drivers at taxpayers' expenses. We all know that our parliament meets very, very infrequently. And to be honest, if Dr. Mitchell is concerned so much about curtailing public expenditure, he might be encouraged to look in the direction of some of the perks, such as a driver. And while we are on that, I'm wondering whether the leader of the opposition has been afforded a driver, because I see a particular MP. In fact, in the last parliament, there were 2 MPs from St. Patrick's, one from the East who had no ministerial position with a driver, the current one from the West, no ministerial position either, and with a driver around the clock. I'm happy for the gentlemen who are getting a little pankwai, especially in this rough time. But at the same time, we need to be consistent, and we need to ensure that our monies are well spent and that everything is done in an equitable and above board manner.
Are you somewhat satisfied with the work that Mr. Clement has put in so far? I mean, I know it's only been a few weeks and not much has been happening outside of COVID-19, but the little that he has said so far about his plans and so on, what are the NDC's thoughts on his intentions in filling the leader of the opposition seat?
By statements that he has made so far regarding the poor governance practices, these are things that we have been speaking about for years in the NDC. The question of the way that the constituency offices of the MPs are run as de facto NNP offices, where all of the party's political work, the canvassing, everything is done from those offices. So in effect, we have a situation where the taxpayers of this country have been paying for the rent and the maintenance of NNP offices for the past 8 years. So I join him in calling on the administration to stop those practices. If you want to run your party office, find your own money to run your party office. Do not let your party usurp the authority and the functions of the state.
What is the relationship like between the NDC and Mr. Clement? And I also wanted to ask specifically about Ms. James's withdrawal from his request for her to serve in the upper house. She accepted and then later, said no, thank you. Where does the NDC stand in that you just now don't have representation in the Senate any longer?
In terms of relationship, I don't know that there is any official relationship. Of course, both of us being in opposition to the government, I think it would be in the interests of both parties and in the national interest for there to be at least a level of cooperation and coordination where necessary. I think that is a sensible approach to take. We do not see Mr. Clement as an enemy or as someone that we have to fight against or fight down. We believe that he has a role to play as official opposition, and we encourage him. We'd like to encourage him to do the best he can under the circumstances. Regarding Ms. James, I believe that she might be best positioned to answer that question. I was not privy to any decision-making process involving that. So I would not like to stick my head out and speak about something that I don't have information on.
Fair enough, understood. Let's now look to St. Patrick, where you are a caretaker in one of the constituencies. There have been some environmental issues taking place, specifically in Satires and the breakwater system, as well as in the Mount Rodney area. What are your thoughts as the caretaker for one of the St. Patrick constituencies? What is taking place up there? What can you tell us about how the problem can be rectified at soonest?
First of all, how the problem came about. The problem came about because of the periodic encroachment of the sea into the lower Satires area, where some buildings belonging to the family of Mr. Kenny Lal Singh and other buildings are located. So from time to time, the sea would come in and those buildings would take a battering. So most people recognize that something needed to be done to protect the lower part of Satires. And the common thought was the erection of a breakwater to lessen the impact of the Atlantic Sea pounding that area of the coast. However, the problem was that no environmental impact study was done prior to the implementation of that project. In fact, I would say openly that that project was implemented mainly to score political points because there was a lie propagated by members of the administration and people associated with them that the project was not implemented because NDC supposedly did not want good for Satires, which is nonsense, okay? So they rushed into that to score political points for the upcoming election. No environmental impact study done, very little consultation. And by all accounts, what was built was a wall more than a breakwater. So all of the water that previously went into the low town area of Satires was diverted westward towards Mount Craven and Mount Rodney. And as a result, what used to be one of the loveliest beaches in Grenada is now almost totally gone. Where before one would be able to walk several meters over the sand before one got into the water, the sea is right now literally at the edge of the road. And mitigating action needs to be taken as of yesterday. Whether the government has the will or the means to do it, that's a totally different question. But what we have now is that a number of people, their livelihoods are at risk, their homes are at risk, the road is at risk, the communities of Darby and Prospect, neglected at the best of times, are also now in danger of being totally cut off. What makes matters worse is that from the Duquesne end, there is a little bridge, which we call the Chapel Bridge, which was destroyed a few years ago, and a so-called temporary structure, which cannot accommodate heavy traffic, was put up there. So that temporary structure has been in place for quite a number of years, about 5 years now, in the Duquesne area. So if anything were to happen to that little bridge, and given the situation that we have in the Mount Rodney area, it is quite possible that the people of Darby and Prospect can be marooned. So I would like to call on the MPs for St. Patrick's, East and West, Moses and Mr. Boson, Mrs. Moses and Mr. Boson, to please prevail upon the Prime Minister to ensure that corrective measures are taken for the survival of those communities that are currently being affected by the fallout from the breakwater/wall project.
Is there hope for repair at the project, at the site specifically?
you may have to ask someone with a more technical background. But there probably are things that can be done. And we cannot just sit back and say, well, it's done, so let us leave it as a bad job. No, because what is happening is that it's getting worse. Whereas before the erosion was something gradual, nowadays you're seeing it literally before your eyes. You pass at 9 o'clock in the morning and a coconut tree is there. And sometimes an hour later, when the sea is really bad, that coconut tree has disappeared. That is the extent of destruction. And while we're on the environment, not in St. Patrick's, a couple of weeks ago, I read a very pretty statement issued by Minister Steele, that is the Englishman, not Nicola Steele, about World Environment Day, talking all about the need to preserve and to protect and so on. And while he's speaking, we are seeing a brutal assault on La Sagesse, where the pond is being destroyed, the docks are being destroyed, driven out, displaced, and so on. So what we're finding here is a typical behavior of the administration, where they say what needs to be said, what sounds good, and what is correct to be said. They pass the necessary legislation. They attract a lot of international funding because of their legislative record on the environment. But the practice is a totally different scenario. So while on the one hand, they ban the importation of vehicles above 10 years old, supposedly to protect the environment, they are destroying mangroves, destroying wetlands, just bulldozing the whole place in the name of so-called development. Again, concerned citizens have to rise up and make our voices be heard. We have a responsibility to protect what nature has bestowed on us, and more so, to preserve and improve it for future generations of Grenadians. History will be very unkind of us if we allow this administration to continue to wantonly rape and ravage our natural environment.
Some may argue that sometimes sacrifices may need to be made for development.
Indeed. You cannot eat your cake and still have it. Okay? We all recognize that. I don't believe that any rational person would say that we should remain in the same way that Columbus and those guys met us in. I drive a car. Okay? It has impact with its emissions and so on. The point is, though, about being responsible and about doing things in a sustainable way. And any little child in standard one could tell you, before you cut down a tree, plant two. So these are the kinds of things. When you destroy mangroves, these are things that you lose sometimes forever. These are the breeding grounds for all different types of marine life. So down the road, the livelihoods of our fishermen and women, our fish vendors, processors, and so on, exporters, will be affected. So what we are seeing here is a situation similar to if you feel thirsty, you feel like drinking a coconut. You cannot climb the coconut tree, but you have an axe in your hand. So you decide you won't wait until somebody you can climb comes. You chop down the coconut tree just to drink one jelly. That is the approach that they are taking to development. That is not sustainable, and we are all paying and will continue to pay the price for that reckless behavior.
How does the NDC plan to have the government address these issues? Because seeing them and speaking out against them is one thing, but fighting the good fight is another. Does the NDC have plans to fight the good fight?
It is simple. The government has the means to do what is right. The question is that they do not have the will to do it. And I believe that after having spent over 20 years in office, 21 of the last 25 years in office, there is sufficient evidence to show that this current group does not intend to manage our resources in a responsible and sustainable way. And I believe that the only solution, or the only thing that can put us on a path towards finding a solution, is to vote them out of office. You cannot put Dracula to watchman the blood bank and expect the blood to stay. Can't.
All right, let me move on to another. I'm trying to get as many issues covered as possible because it's been a while since we've had the NDC on the program. As it relates
Get us back soon again.
hopefully
Probably tomorrow. Tomorrow.
As it relates to the current impasse between bus owners and drivers and government, where does the NDC stand on this issue? Because the arguments are no is not the time, and the busmen are saying we need it to sustain our livelihood. Where does the NDC stand?
We stand on the side of right and justice. Now, this is a very simple matter to be resolved. And again, all it takes is the will and the right thinking to get it done. You started by saying 5 passengers, and everybody was in line with that. Good. The minute, in my view, you go up to 12 persons on a bus, there is no practical difference in terms of containing the spread of COVID-19, whether you have 12 persons on a bus or 17 or 19, because the minute you go to 12, it's a very small enclosed space. Everybody is literally within touching distance. There is no way you can maintain more than a meter apart with 12 persons on a minibus. So my view, this is not the NDC's view, this is Joseph Andall speaking, is that from the moment you say, let's go up to 12, you might as well go the full hog, because there is no practical difference in terms of the effect. So if you allow the bus drivers to take the maximum load, that will go a long way towards mitigating some of the problems that they face. Remember, they are making fewer trips because not all business places are open or operating at full capacity. Schools are virtually closed, so that's another source of passengers shut off to them. The price of gas remains the same for them and for everybody else. They are the ones who keep things flowing. If there is no transportation, everything grinds to a halt. So while we are not saying that they should increase the bus fare, because if you increase the bus fare, the working poor and the unemployed are the ones who will be most negatively affected by it. So I believe that the fare can remain as is, but allow the drivers to take the full load capacity. Also, the government has been collecting $5.50 per gallon on petrol for the past few years since the start of the structural adjustment program. Government has been giving subsidies to airlines, to hotels, to all kinds of bandits and crooks who come in here posing as investors. The busmen, the bus operators are some of the most heavily taxed business people in our country. Remember, the government increased the duties on parts, on tires, and so on. So all of these have contributed to the increase in the operating costs of the buses. So therefore, a rebate system whereby, for example, government may decide in conjunction with the bus association, we can decide to forego $1 or $1.50 or $2 on every gallon of gas. I believe that could go a long way towards resolving the situation. And of course, that doesn't have to be a permanent solution, but say for a 3, 4, or 6 month period. Because remember, if the buses don't run, you do not collect any taxes from petrol, from the sale of petrol in any case. So I think that's a simple matter to resolve. All that is needed is a bit of wisdom, a bit of fairness, and the right will, the political will to get it done. Instead, I believe that in typical fashion, Dr. Mitchell is playing macho man and strong man, trying to see if he can wear down the resolve of the bus operators, knowing that sooner or later they have to face the bank or the credit union, that they have their children to feed and their other living expenses to meet. So I believe that he's playing a smart but cruel game of starve out. It is the same tactic that was used against the teachers to break their strike and to try to break their morale. So the people of Grenada have to be very careful. You know the trickster that you're dealing with. There's the same tricks over and over. We have to stop getting taken in with the same tricks by the same trickster every time.
On that note, let's take a very quick break and come back inside. We are speaking with NDC St. Patrick West caretaker Joseph Andall. This is To The Point on Classic, Hot and GBN. We'll be right back.
Greetings, everyone. I hope this message meets you and yours in the best of health as we join in encouraging all to act responsibly.
COVID-19 presents the most serious
and deadly challenge
any of us will experience in our lifetimes.
We must act now.
We need to keep the Caribbean safe.
We can all help to stop the spread of the coronavirus. Please stay at home.
So Caribbean people, please stay home.
Caribbean people, please stay at home.
Please stay home. It's that simple. This too shall pass, but for now, stay home.
Stay in your yard. Stay home, stay safe.
I'm Francis Urias Peters. I'm a good listener, and K105 has always been a great source of education and entertainment. Now, while the station name may have changed over the years, it has always provided valuable information which enabled me as a playwright to document and to celebrate our history, our behavior, and our achievements. K105 is my choice. It's the national station.
Sneezes spread diseases, so cover coughs and sneezes, please. Not with a rag or bandana. They trap germs. When you use the rag again, you put germs on your hands and everything else you touch. When you cough or sneeze, cover your mouth and nose with tissue. Throw the tissue in a bin and wash your hands afterwards. If you don't have a tissue, cough into your sleeve or elbow. Alcohol-based hand sanitizers are also effective in cleaning hands.
Remember, if you have flu symptoms, do the right thing and stay at home to avoid giving it to others. Remember, you can be infectious up to a week after developing symptoms, so rest up and take it easy.
Wait to see my granddaughter.
Welcome back to The Point for Tuesday, June 16th, 2020. We are speaking with St. Patrick West caretaker for the National Democratic Congress, Joseph Andall, on various issues and thoughts, trying to get the thoughts of the party on various issues of national importance. Before we open the phone lines, I wanted to also ask about the Royal Grenada Police Force. They have come under both criticism and commendation recently for the operations within the force. What's the NDC or your thoughts on the current status of the RGPF?
Now, I think that the RGPF deserves high commendation for the way that they have conducted themselves generally throughout the state of emergency. Many people are of the view that the police have been thrust into the limelight and to become almost de facto governors of the country. Many people believe that the executive branch of government has gone into hiding, if not totally collapsed. One cannot see them or hear from them with the exception of Minister Steele with his COVID-19 briefings, maybe one or two interventions by Minister of Education, and one or two little half-hearted appearances by the Prime Minister. So many things which some people claim that some matters which rightly should have been dealt with by the executive, that the police were thrust in front to do them. Now, one of the concerns I have is about interference, political interference in the workings of the RGPF. The police are professionals, and they are there to serve and protect the entire nation. Administrations come and go, the RGPF is always there. And we expect that there will be a level of coordination between the administration and the hierarchy of the RGPF, especially dealing with matters of national security. There is no questioning that. However, there have been very disturbing reports of police officers in attempting to execute their functions under the state of emergency by ensuring that people obey the curfew, that businesses close by the stipulated time, that some officers have run afoul of members of the political directorate. It is my understanding that police officers sometimes get calls from MPs. Leave my people alone. You're interfering with my boys and them, leave them alone. And in at least one case, it is alleged that a police officer was summarily transferred, supposedly on the intervention of an MP. If that truly is the case, we're calling on all political actors to please cease and desist from interfering with the police in their execution of their professional functions. That is a bad precedent. Well, it's not a precedent, but it is a bad path to continue to follow. This is another example of what we refer to as bad governance. Now, those things have consequences, and sometimes you don't see them right away. Very often, we look at our neighbors in Trinidad and Tobago, in Jamaica, we look at the level of violence and the number of criminal acts, the number of homicides and so on, and we smile and we say, we're not like that. They used to be just as we are right now, calm and peaceful, leave your door open and go and come back and meet everything intact. The problem started to a great extent when politicians started to get into bed with criminal and gangster elements, awarding them contracts and giving them territories to control, monies to spread in communities so that they could buy influence. And at election time, a gangster can deliver you 200 votes or 500 votes, because every time the boys on the block want to make a cook, he could push his hand in his pocket and buy all the back and neck, buy all Libya and all the rivers and provide everything. And in return, that gangster gets protection. The situation in our neighboring countries, which now have that problem, got to such a point where after a while, the tail started wagging the dog. Those guys became so powerful that the state could not touch them. We only have to look at what happened with the Duddas Cook incident in Jamaica not too long ago. Now, I'm not saying that we are at that stage yet, but remember, when you see a 21-year-old running at 10 seconds over the 100 meters, that was somebody who once could not even turn his own body on a bed as a baby. So we are seeing the incipient stages of that kind of marriage between gangsters and politicians in Grenada. If you go along many of the construction projects, government construction projects, roadworks and so on, some of the people who are given the contracts are known drug dealers in our country. And the people in the communities know it and know them. But because some people have now begun to recognize that poverty can be a good political weapon, they do things to keep people poor and dependent, then those guys who later emerged to be what the Jamaicans call dons or so-called community leaders, they begin to hold sway over communities to threaten and intimidate people. And I'm calling on the ruling party to nip this practice in the bud, because when it gets out of hand, no one will be safe. We do not want Grenada to get to the point where if you're living on the Carenage, you can't go Belmont. If you're from Samaritan, you can't go Chantemel. No. That is not a road that we want to go. And if you're prepared to do all of those things to hold on to political power, people of our country have to wise up, open our eyes, and ensure that we do the right thing at the next opportunity.
All right, at this point, we're going to open the phone lines to our viewers and listeners. If you want to join the conversation or ask a question of Mr. Andall, this is a chance to do so. You can phone in with your comments, questions, queries, concerns on the landline. It's 435-2041. You can also do so on the WhatsApp, but only written messages on the WhatsApp. No voice or video calls, no links, no YouTube links, no videos, no pictures, only written messages on the WhatsApp. You can also message us on the GBN Television Facebook page or the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel. So let's go to our first phone call of the program, and if we can please keep our comments, questions, queries, concerns to 1 minute or less to ensure that we facilitate as many as possible. Good morning.
Morning. I'm glad to see the gentleman there because I remember in George Grant days and probably in Tillman Thomas days, whether they had opposition or a main opposition party or not, all oppositions was given the opportunity on this station to come and air their views, and I still have the opinion, because I remember when Tillman was there too, and people was arguing with me, and I know that all the different parties used to come on this station regardless of whoever was in the opposition. So I still stay by my point. But what I want to say to the gentleman there, I hear about this accusation that you make against whatever it is. Do you have any concrete evidence to come on a public radio station and make that allegation? So, but my specific point is that I'm glad that other opposition parties are airing their views here, because that was done long before, and they're arguing with me and telling me no, it was not done. It was done before, and I'm glad to see you there.
Thank you very much, caller. Mr. Andall?
Right. Yes, I just want to rectify one thing. I did not make an accusation per se. I was careful to note that these are reports circulating in some quarters, and in some cases there is anecdotal evidence to suggest that some of those practices are indeed taking place. Regarding the question of access and the ability of opposition forces to air their views, that is a very, very important thing. And I also remember that when the NDC was in office, that the GIS did afford a slot to the then opposition New National Party. So you see, the more you give people access to different viewpoints and to information, the better able your people will be to pick sense from nonsense, to understand what is going on, to make decisions from which the country will benefit ultimately.
Back to the phone line. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Citizen Welsh. Good morning, and good morning to your guest, Mr. Andall. Here is Mr. Andall. I'm happy, albeit in a different way. You have admitted that the sheer state of Grenada has been sequestered by an organized crime syndicate. The problem is, how do we resolve that? Do you share the same view that you did 2 years ago when I introduced the question of a new constitution in this country? Has your opinion changed relative to the dubious nature of this constitution, which is in effect an imperial order in council of the Queen's most excellent majesty, which has to be a document which was never enacted in the parliament of the country, neither accepted by the people in popular referendum? Have your opinions changed? And can you tell us, what you have, in the interest of your party, planned for changing and eliminating this evil system of colonialism that is ruling this here country through the works of an organized crime syndicate. I hope my question is clear. Have a nice day, will you?
Thank you, Citizen
Thank you,
Rollo.
Citizen Rollo, and likewise to you. My opinion regarding the need for an overhaul of the Constitution, if not a brand new one, as you suggest, remains the same. I also share your idea that the Constituent Assembly is the way to go towards that. The recent efforts at constitutional reform have really been farcical. And Citizen Rollo, you have caused me to think about something. Remember that one of the items on the first referendum was that there be a leader of the opposition at all times. The NDC position at the time was that if you have electoral reform, you introduce a level of proportional representation to complement or to go hand in hand with the first past the post system, that would guarantee you representation in the lower house and also automatically a leader of the opposition. What was proposed before us was something that the resignation of Honorable Tobias Clement has brought to stark light the farcical nature of what was put on the ballot. And it has vindicated the position of the National Democratic Congress to not support those elements of the referendum. Because had that item been passed, what would have happened was that the NDC, by virtue of having received the second highest percentage of the votes, would have had the opportunity to name a leader of the opposition. But as soon as Honorable Tobias Clement crossed the floor, the person representing the 40% who voted for the NDC would automatically have to vacate that position, and all of the power and authority vested in that person would revert to the now opposition leader. So we have to, that is why when we are doing something, we must not do it in a kind of lackluster, partisan manner. We must do it because of its merit and because of the way it can transform our country over a long period of time in a positive way.
Let me go back to the phone lines and then I'll get to the social media questions. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I know you wouldn't give me so much time, so I'll only ask two questions. Miss, I'm asking in connection with Mr. Clement, do you think, I hope you answer this question also, do you think that Mr. Clement was aware of what he was doing? Maybe, do you think he was aware that maybe this could have caused, when he tried to select two people from your party, that could have broken up your party, or were you trying to infiltrate into your party and take over or cause it to be dead? That's one. And the other one, I'm asking you, what do you assess, or how do you assess the ruling government handling the virus? Do you think that they did good or they did bad? And if they did good, why? And if they did bad, why? But what I'm saying, I feel that for me personally, one man has tried his best because we didn't have any local person. Do you think it's right to promote it everything and allow these young boys, younger than you, to be running up and down the street without a mask, and they have a law? Who should carry out the law? Is it the police or the Prime Minister? Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
Okay, good. Right. So first of all, to your first question, unfortunately, I cannot go into Mr. Clement's mind to say what might have motivated him to invite one of our members to serve in the upper house as a senator. So that is open to everybody's interpretation, and I do not like to get into that type of speculation in terms of trying to read somebody's mind. Regarding the response of the government to COVID-19, I believe that we have to be honest. And up to this point, in spite of Dr. Mitchell's playing Russian roulette by initially allowing all of these flights to come in the early stages and in the dead of night, that we have been able to dodge the bullet. And a lot of the credit has to go to, again, members of the RGPF, to members of the much maligned healthcare sector. These are the same people who used to say tipping chicken and doing all kind of things. These are the same ones in whose hands our well-being was entrusted and is still entrusted in this period of time. So by and large, we have been able to do fairly well up to this point in terms of restricting or containing the spread of the disease. We cannot, however, begin to relax and say, well, the worst is over, because everybody is telling you that there may be a second wave which can be worse. And given the fact that sooner or later our borders will be open, we have to be extremely vigilant. And our government has to make sure at all times that the need for resuming normal economic activity does not override its responsibility to protect the health and well-being of the nation. We know that we cannot stay under lockdown forever or indefinitely, but we have to be extremely careful in terms of the steps that we take, in terms of who we let in terms of what measures we have in place to test, to trace, to isolate, and so on. Regarding the last point you made, it was no question about young people running about without masks. I have seen a lot of that irresponsible behavior too. And I would like to urge everyone doing that to please remember that the life you save may be your own, or your mother's, or your child's, or your girlfriend's, or your boyfriend's. So when out in public, please mask up. We said no carnival, we didn't say no mask. All right? So do the right thing and do the wise thing regarding that.
We said no carnival, but no mask. That made me laugh. There's a question on the WhatsApp that asks, will the NDC consider prosecuting anyone who passed laws that goes against the Constitution, including those that give permission to destroy the environment?
That's a very interesting question. I'm not sure if you can prosecute someone for passing a law. There are measures in place for challenging the legality or the constitutionality of a law. But as far as I'm aware, being no legal scholar, I do not think that one can prosecute someone for passing a law, right? What one can do is, where evidence surfaces of illegal behavior, if, for example, evidence comes up after investigation that a particular individual, for example, accepted a bribe to facilitate a particular investment or a particular action or set of actions, then of course, the legal arm of the state can and should step in. And I believe that one of the areas that we have shown great weakness in Grenada is our high level of tolerance for criminal conduct by politicians in office. And until and unless people start being made to account for their stewardship and to be responsible for wrong things that they do, we are going to continue to have that kind of abuse of our little country. I maintain that in the same way that we go after a young man who shoplifts a Coke or a packet of Cricks, we should go after those who cause millions to disappear. We heard our Prime Minister talk about the $52 million that disappeared from the shrimp farm. He spoke about an investigation. What has become of that investigation? We go back to the cell phone scandal. What has become of that? So many other things. And you know, the interesting thing is that some people, they do not want you to talk about those things. They say, oh, you keep digging up these things. We have to keep digging them up because the monies that are squandered could have gone to fixing our healthcare system. We are now scrambling, for example, to find ways to teach our children while they are out of school. This is the same administration that when they were campaigning years ago promised tablets and laptops. How handy would they have been in a time like now, right? So when you squander resources like that, you deprive the very citizens of the means to improve their livelihoods, their standard of living, and you rob the country of the opportunity to develop itself sustainably. So we as concerned citizens, and it must not be left only to the National Democratic Congress or to the official opposition, but to our civic groups and other enlightened individuals to take those in authority to task. Today, it is the NNP. Tomorrow, it may be the NDC or some other group or formation. We as citizens must hold those in political office to high standards. We must demand performance from them, and we must not let personal or partisan affiliation blind us to the need to ensure that things are done right.
Let's go back to the phone line. Good morning.
Good morning, my wonderful lady and Mr. Andall. And how is St. Patrick, Mr. Andall? I'm going back to St. Patrick in any case, concern Lotong, down by the Bay, Lotong area, in any case. You know, for years I know Serestong, the water never at peace yet, always at war with the land. We used to have cement sandbank in my school time, walking on sandbank from the fish market right down to the lagoon. In the days gone by, about 6 feet high sandbanks, and all that taken away by the sea. We even have lands are lower down by the fish market there right now, in my youth time. And all these cocoa trees, they eat away by the seawater. But we have the volcano right now, Kigamjini volcano open right now. You must expect that as the seacoast must be rugged. You must expect that. We had a fish market, a meat market once over time, back by Mr. Park Day, a meat market. They had a wall issue. But you see, until it burst the wall. The fish market mashed down and all. So if you go and put a barricade there right now to cool down the pour the water. They put a back wall, they put some stone and in it. You must expect that the water will be different, but the water did never, from years gone by, thousands years ago, that water still is the same water that is going right now. Kigamjini always kicking up around our area, and that is northern part of the island. So we can be right now. But so the water in will be cool and calm? No, it will be rugged. You tell me good, you tell me get good, you get bad, Concern, I mean, things I mentioned in the radio about things you hear and you come on the radio and implement things. When you hear things, I mean, certain news and things, you have to make sure you have concrete facts of what you hear, you know that directly to breathe in the air and broadcast it to the world.
All right.
What about that in any case? Not me and all that playing green.
Thank you very much, caller.
Right. Yeah, the point here is about the sea periodically encroaching. I made the same points, and I did acknowledge that there was a need for the lower part of Sates to be protected. So we are not saying anything different. What I'm saying is that the manner in which this thing was done was in a very haphazard manner. It was not planned. Mr. Boson himself admitted that there was no environmental impact study done prior to the construction. And in fact, he made a most ludicrous statement that, don't worry, we are going to do the study afterwards. That is like building a house and then you're drawing up a plan. So we must not confuse matters here. Yes, periodically the sea gets rough, and not only in Sates. I used to live in Guelph. My father was a fisherman on the lands, and there were a couple of occasions when the sea would cross Depredin Street and go over onto the other side. Nobody's disputing that. But no one can dispute either the fact that since the construction of that wall, the Mount Rodney Beach has been destroyed. So I really don't understand the point that the caller was trying to get at.
Any final words, Mr. Andall?
Yes, quickly. We have some students in Cuba, and one of them reached out to me a couple days ago about a predicament. Apparently, some of them, if not all of them, want to come home. The problem they are facing is getting a chartered flight at a reasonable cost. It appears that students from other Caribbean countries were able to secure chartered flight in the region of about $750 per person on average, but the same airline, they say, is asking them to pay almost $1,200 US dollars. So if there is anyone listening, especially in government, with the ability to facilitate those students, I would like to urge you to please look into that matter and to ensure that the students, I know that in Cuba, they are being well taken care of. I've been to Cuba as a student and afterwards, and I know that the Cubans take their responsibility very, very seriously. But in a time like now, everybody wants to be home close to their family and so on. And if they want to come home for a little while, I believe that our government has a responsibility to do everything possible to facilitate the temporary return so that they and their families can be at peace, can have some peace of mind, and at the appropriate time, return to continue their studies. So I would like to thank the GBN for this opportunity. I would also like to urge the GBN to widen the scope, if possible, and to not have the official opposition, the NDC, the NGO community, and so on, fighting to get their voices heard once every 3 or 4 months on a kind of roster system on the Tuesday program. But open up the Wednesday program, because the Wednesday program, as far as I understand, is a political program by nature of the administration. They have GIS at their disposal. They have their surrogates and radio stations, TV, newspaper, and so on. They can preempt by saying, we have a national address, and come on, at no cost. So thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it. But please consider widening the scope so that our people are presented with a deeper and richer menu for consumption. And thank you very much to all the listeners and viewers. Thank you for your questions and your comments. And let us all continue to play our part to make Grenada safe, to make Grenada the truly pure Grenada that is talked about. Pure not only environmentally, but politically, socially, spiritually, and otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andall. You have yourself a blessed Tuesday and stay safe.
Thanks, and same to you.
Thank you very much. We'd like to thank NDC Caretaker for St. Patrick West, Mr. Joseph Andall, for being our guest this morning as the GBN diversifies its Tuesday platform to also include inclusion. Or in addition to the leader of the opposition, Tobias Clement, we will also be including civil society and other stakeholders, specifically on Tuesdays. We'd like to thank him once again for being our guest, and thank you, our viewers and listeners, for tuning into the program. Just as a note before I leave, I've been informed that a bunch of keys have been found in the Tantine area this morning. It includes car keys, possibly house keys, and others on the bunch. So if you've lost your bunch of keys, please contact the GBN Administration Office on 440-3033 to make arrangements to collect. Again, a bunch of keys was found in Tantine this morning. Call the GBN 440-3033 to make arrangements to collect. Thank you guys once again. That's the end of my time today. Joseph is already in the studio, ready to take you to midday on Mid-Morning Buzz. Have yourselves a productive Tuesday. Be safe and continue to stay healthy. Have a good one, everybody.